African soldiers betraying their own land. The recruitment of African soldiers to fight for France was one of the most effective yet insidious tactics of colonial control. France, like other European colonial powers, knew that outright occupation wasn't sustainable in the long run, so they relied on strategic manipulation using the very people they oppressed to uphold their empire. The Tirailleurs Senegalese were one of the most well-known groups of African soldiers used by France, but they were just one example. These African men were forcibly conscribed or coerced into military service, told they were fighting for glory, honor, or even citizenship, a promise that was rarely fulfilled. France positioned them not as protectors of their homelands, but as extensions of the French military, willing to fight against the Africans who resisted colonial rule. In many cases, these soldiers were used to suppress independence movement in their own nation. For example, during World War I and II, France took thousands of African soldiers to fight in Europe, but when the wars ended, they were either abandoned, denied equal pay, or massacred when they demanded their rights. Like the infamous Traoré massacre of 1944, where French authorities killed their own African veterans demanding rightful compensation. In Vietnam and Algeria, France used African soldiers to suppress anti-colonial uprising. These men, conditioned through French military doctrine, were now fighting against people with the same skin as them, the same cultural background, people who were simply demanding freedom from oppression. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was psychological. France made these soldiers believe they were part of something bigger than their homeland. They were made to feel that loyalty to France was a higher duty than loyalty to their own people. This strategy ensured that colonial resistance movements had to fight not just against European troops, but against their own brothers, who had been indoctrinated to believe that serving the colonizers was the only path forward. This same strategy has been used globally, particularly in the US, with Black Americans in the military. Black Americans fighting for the US military. The United States has a long history of using Black soldiers for its wars while denying them full rights and respect. Since the Revolutionary War, Black Americans have fought in every major conflict under the illusion that their service would grant them equality. Time and time again, they proved their loyalty to a country that in return treated them as disposable. The Revolutionary War, Black soldiers fought for America's independence while still being enslaved. Imagine that. Civil War, the Union accepted Black soldiers when it became clear that they were needed, yet they were paid less than white soldiers and often given the most dangerous assignments. World War I, Black soldiers were sent to fight in Europe, but upon returning home, they were met with racial violence during the Red Summer of 1919 when white mobs attacked Black communities fearing their growing strength. World War II, the U.S. military was still segregated, and Black soldiers often served in menial roles rather than combat. Despite their sacrifice, they returned home to Jim Crow laws and racial terrorism. The psychological conditioning here was strikingly similar to what happened to the African soldiers under French rule. Black soldiers were made to believe that by proving themselves in the war, they could finally achieve equality. But the reality was that the U.S. government was happy to use their strength while refusing to grant them the same freedoms they fought to protect. Make it make sense. Even today, many Black Americans serve in the military because they see it as a path to economic stability, education, and discipline, right? However, they are still disproportionately assigned to lower ranking roles, face racial discrimination within the military, and are often placed on the front lines in combat situations. The military is one of the U.S. government's most powerful tools for keeping Black men and women in service to a country that has never fully respected them. It's a cycle that continues unless more people recognize the pattern and resist. Trump's effort to remove Black soldiers right now from the military. Now, with Trump back in the political arena, he is actively working to reverse the presence and influence of Black soldiers in the military. His motivations are twofold. One, to reassert white dominance in the armed forces by ensuring the military is more aligned with white nationalism. Two, to weaken Black economic and social mobility, since the military has historically been one of the few institutions that provided stable jobs, education, and healthcare to Black families. Trump has openly criticized efforts to make the military more diverse, calling them woke, and claiming they weaken the armed forces. But what does woke mean in this context? It means any policy or program that ensures racial equality, inclusion, or the acknowledgement of systemic oppression. By attacking woke policies, Trump is attacking Black soldiers' right to exist within the military structure on equal footing. His administration has fought against diversity training in the military, claiming it was divisive, encouraged far-right military leaders to resist racial inclusion, downplayed the contributions of Black soldiers while celebrating Confederate history and white supremacist narratives. Now that Trump has regained power, his administration has already taken more extreme steps to reduce the presence of black soldiers, which include rolling back affirmative action policies that help black soldiers advance in rank. He's been targeting black officers and ordering their dismissal of the guise of military restructuring, promoting a culture of hostility that discourages black enlistment altogether. This is part of a larger effort to redefine American power as a white power. A military without strong black leadership is a military that can be used against black people, much like how African soldiers were manipulated into suppressing their own countries under French rule. The ultimate question is, if black people keep fighting wars for countries that don't respect them, who are they really fighting for? The more black soldiers defend a system that seeks to remove them, the more they reinforce the very oppression they should be resisting. The U.S. military, like France's colonial armies, has never been about black empowerment. It has always been about using black bodies for imperialist gains while keeping true power out of their hands. This cycle will only end when more black people recognize that the game being played and shift their focus towards self-determination, economic independence, and the protection of their own communities, not the defense of a system that was never meant to serve them.